In the summer of 1944, rumors raced through American troops like an inferno spreading across dry fields. The Germans had unveiled a fearsome super tank weighing in at 70 tons and bristling with firepower. Its armor was so formidable that it could shrug off attacks from Sherman tanks as if they were mere pinpricks. Equipped with a devastatingly powerful gun capable of annihilating any Allied vehicle from over 2 kilometers away, this behemoth quickly earned the nickname King Tiger among Allied intelligence circles. To German crews, it was known simply as invincible. For American tankers, it became their darkest nightmare. The first sightings came courtesy of British forces battling the Normandy region around Caen. On July 11, 1944, the 3rd Heavy Panzer Battalion deployed King Tigers against Allied positions, sending shockwaves through the ranks. British tank commanders relayed reports that seemed fantastical: tanks larger than any seen before, shells bouncing harmlessly off front armor deemed impregnable, and German artillery firing from ranges where British guns could not retaliate effectively. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. American intelligence officers gathered information from various sources to piece together a coherent picture. Combat assessments from the British Second Army corroborated these findings, while Soviet military intelligence shared details about sightings on the Eastern Front. In August 1944, French resistance networks reported spotting massive tanks being transported by rail through occupied France. Each account painted a consistent image. Germany had fielded an unprecedented class of armored vehicle that surpassed anything in the Allies' arsenal. For months, tales of this mechanical behemoth had been circulating among troops like whispers in the wind. Reports trickling in from British units stationed in Normandy confirmed what Soviet intelligence had already verified on the Eastern Front. Every Allied tank crew was well versed in the statistics of this formidable opponent. The turret boasted 180 mm of frontal armor, while its main armament featured an 8.8 cm gun with a barrel extending over 6 meters. Its combat weight surpassed anything previously seen on tracks. This wasn't merely another tank. It was Germany's response to the Allies' numerical advantage. Conceived as a monster to re-establish German dominance on the battlefield, Allied crews approached its specifications with mounting trepidation. The sheer technical prowess of the King Tiger was daunting. Weighing in at 69.8 tons, more than double that of a Sherman, and equipped with an 8.8 cm K-43 gun capable of penetrating 150 mm of armor from ranges exceeding 2 kilometers, it presented an unparalleled challenge. The sloped frontal armor, measuring 180 mm thick on the turret and 150 mm on the whole front, rendered most Allied anti-tank weapons ineffective. The psychological effect was instantaneous. American tank crews who had previously engaged Panzer IVs and even the formidable Panthers now faced an entirely new adversary. Intelligence briefings highlighted a grim reality: a King Tiger could penetrate the frontal armor of a Sherman from distances where counterattack was impossible. It would take 4 or 5 Shermans working together to flank and destroy a single King Tiger, resulting in significant casualties. The thought of such a formidable foe prowling the battlefield kept many tank commanders awake at night. Stories circulated among crews about encounters with King Tigers reported by their British counterparts. A British officer observed his squadron's shells bouncing off a King Tiger's frontal armor at a distance of 800 meters, seemingly without effect. Another recounted how a single King Tiger obliterated 3 Churchill tanks in quick succession before retreating unscathed. Such tales circulated through Allied armored units, contributing to the formidable reputation of Germany's most advanced tank. This fear was well founded. The combat statistics overwhelmingly favored the King Tiger in direct confrontations. A Sherman 75mm gun could not penetrate a King Tiger's frontal armor at any practical range. Even the upgraded 76mm gun on later Sherman models had difficulty against the King Tiger's heavily sloped armor. British 17-pounder guns offered better odds, but only from optimal angles and at closer distances, where the King Tiger's longer barrel gave German crews an early firing advantage. In early July 1944, a select group of tanks within the elite Panzer division received 5 newly arrived King Tigers destined for Normandy. These vehicles epitomized the pinnacle of German armored technology. Each one was priced at 321 500 marks, equivalent to 3 smaller German tanks, and each took production facilities that could have built 2 Panthers. They were not mass-produced weapons, but meticulously crafted instruments of destruction, showcasing Germany's enduring prowess during a critical time when the Reich urgently needed a breakthrough. The deployment of these 5 King Tigers had symbolic significance beyond their tactical importance. The armaments minister, Albert Speer, had promised increased production of heavy tanks to counterbalance Allied numerical superiority. Factories like Henschel were working diligently to fulfill orders for hundreds of King Tigers, but production remained painfully slow due to a shortage of skilled labor and disruptions caused by Allied bombing raids. Essential materials such as tungsten for armor-piercing rounds and molybdenum for armor plate were becoming increasingly scarce. The completion of each King Tiger tank signified the resilience and determination of German industry in the face of increasing challenges. The crews chosen to operate these formidable machines were also highly skilled veterans who had proven themselves on the Eastern Front. They had endured battles at Kursk and managed to break free from numerous Soviet encirclements. Handpicked for their combat experience, they formed the core of the 316th Panzer Company dedicated to remote-controlled panzers attached to the main panzer force. Their confidence was unshakable, having witnessed firsthand the capabilities of German armor. They had seen Tigers decimate Soviet T-34 formations with ease. Now, they were prepared to demonstrate this superiority against American and British forces. These veterans brought invaluable expertise to their new roles. Few Allied tank crews could match their level of understanding of armored warfare. They knew how to position their vehicles for maximum tactical advantage, appreciating the significance of terrain features such as sight lines and kill zones where enemy tanks would be destroyed before reaching effective range. Their extensive combat experience made them formidable adversaries even in less advanced vehicles. In King Tigers, they believed they could achieve invincibility. Upon seeing their new machines for the first time, these battle-hardened soldiers felt a sense of awe. The King Tiger towered over everything else around it. At 3 meters tall and more than 10 meters long with its gun, weighing in at 69.8 tons fully loaded, it dominated any landscape. Its sloped frontal armor was designed to deflect shells like raindrops, while the formidable 8.8 K43 cannon offered devastating firepower to anything daring enough to enter its field of view. This was not merely a tank, it was a mobile fortress, a weapon destined to alter the course of the war. The teams underwent training to get acquainted with the newly acquired vehicles. They delved into the unique characteristics of the King Tiger's controls. Steering this tank demanded significantly more effort compared to lighter models. Shifting gears required precise handling to prevent any potential damage. The fuel consumption was astonishing, with 190 gallons burned for just 120 kilometers on roads, and off-road use was even less efficient. However, these drawbacks were deemed acceptable given the extraordinary combat capabilities of the King Tiger. In mid-July, orders arrived instructing the King Tigers to move from their assembly area to front-line positions near Tilly and Stee. Lo, the distance to be covered was approximately 80 kilometers through French countryside. With meticulous attention, the crews conducted pre-combat inspections as they had been instructed. They carefully checked oil levels, track tension, fuel quantity, ammunition supplies, and every other system, ensuring everything was in perfect working order. Mechanics gave their final approval, and the company commander reviewed the maintenance records, which indicated that these were brand new tanks from Henschel factory, boasting top-tier German craftsmanship. With all systems green, there seemed to be nothing left to worry about. The first King Tiger set off with full confidence. The Maybach had 12 to 30 P-30 engines sputtered to life, its 700 horsepower struggling against the weight of 70 tons of armored steel. The driver engaged the transmission and felt the tank lurch forward as it began its advance towards the front lines. 4 more King Tigers followed closely behind, their crews ready to showcase Germany's technological prowess. However, less than an hour into the journey, disaster struck. The lead tank's transmission started making ominous noises that no mechanic desires to hear, grinding metal against metal. Despite the driver's efforts to mitigate the damage by shifting gears carefully and reducing speed, nothing could prevent the inevitable failure of the gearbox, which had been pushed beyond its operational limits due to the tank's immense weight. Within minutes, the lead King Tiger came to a halt on a narrow French road, bringing the entire column to a standstill behind it. The crew members were in disbelief as they scrambled out of their vehicles. This was not supposed to happen, especially not to Germany's most advanced tank. The commander immediately ordered repairs, but the mechanics soon delivered devastating news. The transmission had suffered catastrophic internal gear failure and would need to be towed back to a repair facility for a complete gearbox replacement. Moving it would require either another King Tiger or a large recovery vehicle, neither of which was readily available at that moment. The Maybach 4060B transmission used in the King Tiger was essentially identical to that found in the 45-ton Panzer, with German engineers failing to reinforce gearbox components for the extra weight of 25 tons. Consequently, under the strain of moving 70 tons, gear teeth wore out, bearings broke down, and synchronizers deteriorated rapidly. This issue wasn't an isolated manufacturing flaw, but rather a systemic design deficiency. With one vehicle already inoperative, 4 more remained operational, though the column proceeded with diminished confidence yet unwavering determination to reach their combat destination. Certainly, this could be seen as mere bad luck or a production error, but time was of the essence. American and British forces were advancing relentlessly, leaving no room for delays. The remaining King Tigers continued their journey despite these challenges, albeit with somewhat reduced assurance from their commanders about reaching their intended battlegrounds intact. After traveling another 15 kilometers, the second King Tiger encountered engine difficulties. Although adequate for the Panther tank at 45 tons, the Maybach engine was severely underpowered for the weight of 70 tons, yielding a power-to-weight ratio of just over 10 horsepower per ton, far below what was necessary to sustain effective operations. As the vehicle ascended a modest incline, the engine temperature soared. The cooling system, which was inadequate from its initial design, struggled to handle the excessive heat produced by an engine operating at maximum capacity merely to achieve basic speed. Concerningly, the driver observed his temperature gauges moving into the red warning zone. He alerted his commander about the issue. They slowed down in an attempt to allow the engine to cool off. However, this had no effect. The coolant was boiling over, and steam started coming out of the engine compartment. Within minutes, the overheated engine locked up. The pistons expanded within their cylinders until they ceased moving. The tank eventually came to a halt with smoke billowing from the engine deck. German engineers identified the power deficit early in the development stage. The Maybach HL 230 P30 produced 700 horsepower, which was equivalent to the engine used in the lighter Panther tank. Plans were made for an upgraded Maybach 234 fuel-injected engine capable of generating 800 horsepower. However, production delays meant that most King Tigers received the less powerful HL 230 engine. The outcome was foreseeable. Operating at high power outputs over extended periods led to excessive heat buildup, overwhelming the cooling system and triggering a series of mechanical failures. 2 tanks were now out of commission, leaving only 3 operational units. The pattern was becoming evident, and panic began setting in among the remaining crews. These weren't isolated incidents, but systemic issues. The King Tiger, despite its formidable armor and firepower, had a critical flaw. It was too heavy for its drivetrain components. The engine, transmission, and cooling system were all operating beyond their design limits. What seemed invincible on the test range turned out to be unreliable in combat scenarios. The third tank managed to cover an additional 20 kilometers before its drive system ultimately gave out. The colossal gears linking the transmission to the drive sprockets were unable to endure the torque necessary for moving a 70-ton vehicle over uneven terrain. As a result, the teeth on these gears stripped off, causing the drivetrain to seize up entirely and leaving the tank stationary. Its crew exchanged increasingly horrified glances as this occurred. This final drive issue would continue to trouble King Tigers throughout their operational history. A report issued by Panzer 5 and 6 in September 1944 detailed the severity of the problem, noting that 12 final drive housings had failed after only 50 to 100 kilometers of use due to sheared sprocket teeth and broken track tensioning mechanisms. The battalion commander promptly requested an urgent meeting with armaments officials to address these critical failures. With 3 tanks now out of commission, just 2 remained in working order from the original 5 that had set off earlier that morning, none having reached the front lines or engaged any enemy forces. Out of those initial vehicles, 6% had suffered mechanical breakdowns simply while attempting a journey of 80 kilometers on roads. Facing this impossible scenario, the company commander made his only possible decision. He instructed the 2 remaining tanks to proceed at reduced speed and carefully conserve their overtaxed engines, hoping that their transmissions would last just long enough for them to reach friendly territory. Behind him lay 3 of Germany's most advanced tanks, left immobile not by enemy action but as a result of their own engineering flaws. The 4th King Tiger broke down 30 kilometers away from the front line due to suspension issues. The design of overlapping road wheels, intended to manage the tank's immense weight, turned out to be vulnerable to damage. A wheel bearing jammed, causing a locked wheel and leading to the track disengaging from the drive sprocket. This resulted in the vehicle coming to an abrupt halt with a slight tilt to one side, completely immobile. With 4 tanks now out of service and only 1 left, the situation was dire. Only 1 King Tiger from the original 5 made it to German positions near Tilly, achieving a mere 20% success rate. The crew of this solitary survivor saw the trail of broken machines behind them and realized an unfortunate truth: Germany's super tank wasn't as superior as hoped. It was overly complex, underestimated in its complexity, and fundamentally flawed. However, the story doesn't end there. The fate of these 5 King Tigers mirrored a broader trend seen across various battlefields. These particular tanks, with chassis numbers 2D-1 to 2A1005, were among the first King Tigers produced in March 1944 and equipped with early Porsche turrets. They had been assigned to the 316th Panzer Company, a specialized unit using radio-controlled demolition vehicles from Tiger tanks to breach fortifications. When this unit was deployed to Normandy in June 1944, the 5 King Tigers were left behind at Undone, approximately 200 kilometers from the front line, deemed too unreliable for combat operations. Under pressure from urgent operational needs, the unit leader opted to replace the existing equipment with 9 Sturm Tigers assault guns due to their immediate availability and reliability. Meanwhile, 5 unused King Tigers stood as symbols of wasted resources. By mid-August 1944, when Allied forces were advancing through France, these vehicles had become a burden for the German army. Repairing them was impractical since they lacked the necessary heavy recovery gear and spare parts to handle the massive 70-ton tanks. Consequently, it was decided to destroy the King Tigers rather than let them be captured by enemy troops. Explosives were used to dismantle the tanks, with turrets blown off their mounts and the remnants left along French roadsides. Soon after, American forces encountered these abandoned vehicles while advancing through the area. The initial response from American crews upon spotting them was one of extreme caution, anticipating an ambush or fire from the formidable 8.8 cm guns. Instead, they found silence, empty tanks with open hatches and long vacated crew compartments. It became evident that the Germans had destroyed what they could and abandoned the rest due to their inability to recover or repair them. American tank crews were incredulous at the sight of these supposedly invincible machines lying inert on the battlefield. They had been trained to fear King Tigers as nearly indestructible death traps, yet here they saw evidence of German engineering turning against itself. The first intact King Tiger captured by American forces proved invaluable for intelligence purposes. Teams from First Army's Technical Intelligence arrived equipped with cameras, measurement tools, and cutting gear. They were soon joined by engineers from the Ordnance Department, alongside British liaison officers who provided valuable expertise. The thorough examination would take several days to complete and generate reports that would circulate throughout Allied command structures. Engineers and technical specialists meticulously examined every inch of the abandoned Techling vehicle. Their goal was to gain a comprehensive understanding of its capabilities and limitations. They needed to know how it functioned, where it fell short, and how to neutralize it effectively. The findings they uncovered were astonishing. The armor was particularly impressive. 180 mm at the turret front sloped at an angle of 80 degrees from vertical, and 150 mm on the hull front sloped at a 50-degree angle. This level of protection rendered it nearly impervious to most American and British tank guns in service. Shells that could have penetrated a Panther bounced off the King Tiger's glacis plate without even denting it. Tests with captured armor plates confirmed that standard 7500 mm Sherman rounds were incapable of penetrating at any range, while improved 76 mm rounds found themselves struggling against the thick sloped armor. The gun itself was equally formidable. The 8.8 Simcable KK-43 could pierce 5 inches of armor at a distance of 2,000 meters. This weapon outmatched every Allied tank cannon in terms of range, firepower, and overall effectiveness. Using separate loading ammunition with projectiles and propellant charges loaded independently slowed down the rate of fire compared to single-piece rounds, but enabled significantly higher muzzle velocities and greater penetration capabilities. In a direct gunnery duel at long range, the King Tiger had all the advantages over its adversaries. American engineers recorded the barrel length as 6.3 meters, which is more than 71 times its caliber. They meticulously inspected the breech mechanism, recoil system, and mountings, all of which exhibited exceptional craftsmanship. Particularly noteworthy were the optics, which included German Zeiss rangefinders and gun sights widely regarded as the best in the world. A King Tiger crew could identify and engage targets at ranges where Allied tanks struggled to even spot them. However, when the engineers turned their attention to the drivetrain, a realization dawned upon them. The transmission design was fundamentally similar to that of the Panther tank, despite the King Tiger weighing 25.5 tons more. Neither the gears nor the bearings showed any significant enhancements in strength or size. Essentially, German engineers had adapted a medium tank's transmission for use in an ultra-heavy tank, expecting it to endure comparable stress levels. This approach inevitably led to predictable outcomes. Upon thorough examination of the captured vehicle, evidence of component failure became evident. Gear teeth displayed signs of excessive wear, bearings showed scoring and spalling, and synchronizer rings were visibly thin. An American mechanical engineer from Detroit who analyzed the transmission concluded that no American auto manufacturer would have approved such a drivetrain for a tank of this weight due to inadequate design margins. The engine issues were even more severe. The Maybach 230P30 generated 700 horsepower, which sufficed for the Panther's 45-ton weight class. However, in the heavier 70-ton King Tiger tank, this engine struggled mightily. The power-to-weight ratio dropped to just over 10 horsepower per ton, rendering it inadequate. In contrast, a Sherman tank weighing 30 tons with its 400 horsepower engine achieved nearly 13 horsepower per ton. Consequently, the King Tiger was less maneuverable than the smaller tanks it intended to outclass. American engineers meticulously calculated fuel consumption based on tank capacity and reported operational ranges. The figures were quite revealing. With an internal fuel capacity of 80-60 liters, the King Tiger could travel around 120 kilometers on roads under ideal conditions. Off-road, this distance was reduced to approximately 80 to 90 kilometers. In combat scenarios with frequent maneuvers, accelerations, and high power demands, its range plummeted to less than 60 kilometers. By comparison, a Sherman tank carrying 60 liters of fuel could travel up to 200 kilometers on roads. The King Tiger required 30% more fuel to cover a distance that was about 40% shorter compared to the Sherman. The logistical implications were severe. An armored column comprising King Tigers would need nearly twice as many fuel trucks as an equivalent American formation. This became particularly problematic in 1944 when Germany faced critical shortages of fuel, severely hampering the effectiveness of these tanks. Additionally, the cooling system struggled under sustained operational conditions. While the radiators, coolant passages, and cooling fan were well designed for normal operations, the King Tiger rarely operated within those parameters. The engine, which was undersized for its weight, ran at high output continuously, generating excessive heat that the system could not adequately dissipate. The radiators failed to dissipate heat effectively, causing the coolant to boil and increasing pressure to a point where gaskets ruptured, leading to engine seizure. This conclusion was corroborated by evidence from the Eastern Front. In August 1944, Soviet forces seized 2 King Tigers near Sandomierz in Poland. These tanks were then transported to the Kubinka testing grounds outside Moscow for thorough analysis and evaluation. The rigorous tests conducted by Soviet engineers mirrored those they performed on their own vehicles. This program exposed significant mechanical issues with the King Tiger. During transport to Kubinka, both captured tanks experienced numerous breakdowns due to inadequate cooling systems that could not handle hot weather operations efficiently. Engine temperatures frequently surpassed safe thresholds, leading to multiple failures. One tank's gearbox malfunctioned entirely during transit, while another required a complete overhaul of its right suspension. Issues that even the spare parts captured alongside the vehicles could not resolve. Upon arrival at Kubinka, Soviet engineers undertook systematic trials involving various terrains and conditions. They measured fuel consumption, tested maximum speeds, and assessed reliability over different landscapes. The results were highly critical. The tanks broke down every 10 to 15 kilometers in warm weather due to consistent cooling system failures when temperatures exceeded 30 degrees. Gearbox overheating was another persistent problem attributed to insufficient cooling and environmental heat. Engineers also tested the tank's armor by firing captured German 88 mm guns at it, revealing that a King Tiger's own gun could penetrate its turret from a distance of 400 meters. This highlighted both the strength of its weaponry and the limitations of its armor, which was thick but not as impervious as advertised by propaganda. Compared to German designs such as the Tiger tank, the welding quality was noticeably inferior despite meticulous craftsmanship. The final drive system, connecting the transmission to the tracks, emerged as another critical weakness, a point confirmed by both American and Soviet testing. The gears had to withstand tremendous torque to move 70 tons of weight. During combat maneuvers like turning in place or quick reversals, these components frequently failed under stress. Captured King Tigers exhibited extensive damage due to final drive failures. This issue was so severe that German field commanders issued guidelines warning Tiger crews against unnecessary maneuvering that could strain the final drives. American engineers compiled their observations into comprehensive technical reports. Intelligence Bulletin No. 184 from 1st Army in September 1944 provided detailed data on the King Tiger, disseminated among Allied armored units to inform tank commanders about German strengths and weaknesses. The assessment was striking. While formidable in direct combat due to its powerful gun and robust armor, the King Tiger's design flaws rendered it a liability over extended operations. Its immense weight made routine maintenance burdensome. A relatively weak engine restricted strategic mobility, and its intricate transmission required constant monitoring. The suspension often became clogged with mud, particularly during winter when freezing temperatures froze overlapping wheels in place. Intelligence concluded that a properly positioned King Tiger could be extremely dangerous in defensive ambushes, offering decisive advantages with its weapon and armor. However, on the offensive, maneuvering across terrain or advancing for prolonged periods would likely result in breakdowns before engaging the enemy. The longer the advance, the higher the likelihood of mechanical failure. As terrain becomes more intricate, the strain on overstressed systems intensifies. This realization quickly altered American tactical strategy. Commanders no longer viewed the King Tiger as an invincible beast, but rather as a formidable yet delicate weapon. The approach shifted from direct frontal engagements to forcing it into movement and maneuvering. Each kilometer covered increased the likelihood of mechanical breakdowns, with every hill climb straining its engine further and each turn wearing down its transmission even more. American forces discovered that due to their weight, King Tigers were unable to cross many bridges. Standard military bridging equipment could not support such heavy vehicles. Engineers determined that despite having wide tracks, the King Tiger's ground pressure was still significant, making it impossible for a 70-ton tank to traverse bridges designed for 50 tons. Rivers that posed no obstacle to other German tanks became insurmountable barriers for the King Tiger. Consequently, its movements were restricted to specific routes, making them more predictable and vulnerable to air attacks. The fuel consumption of the King Tiger was extraordinarily high compared to Allied vehicles. It consumed 190 gallons just to travel 120 kilometers on roads, with off-road conditions exacerbating this to twice that rate. In contrast, a Sherman could cover over 200 kilometers using similar amounts of fuel. This substantial logistical burden meant that King Tigers required extensive support from supply trains, which the German army struggled to maintain by late 1944. Most notably, production constraints severely limited the number of King Tiger tanks available. Germany produced only 492 King Tiger tanks throughout World War II. Production started in January 1944 and ended in March 1945, with a single tank built in 1943, 379 in 1944, and WWII in 1945. This is in stark contrast to the production of other tanks. Approximately 35,000 Panzer Vs, 6,000 Panthers, and 50,000 Shermans by the United States alone. The resources used for one King Tiger could have instead produced 3 Panthers or 5 Panzer IVs. Industrial capacity dictated that Germany's strategic choices were mathematically unsustainable. Strategic bombing campaigns by the Royal Air Force's Bomber Command severely impacted production at the Henschel factory in Kassel during 1944, with raids in September and October causing substantial damage to machinery and disrupting assembly lines, resulting in casualties among skilled workers. Production dropped from over 100 King Tigers per month in summer 1944 to just 30 by year's end. In August 1944, the Panzer Abteilung 501 arrived on the Eastern Front with a complement of 45 King Tigers. Only 8 were operational upon arrival. 37 had broken down during transit, rendering them inoperable despite being brand new out of the factory. This situation highlighted an army struggling rather than advancing towards victory. The battalion departed from Paderborn on August 5, 1944, bound for southeastern Poland over a distance of approximately 800 kilometers by rail. Even transportation posed issues, as King Tigers were too heavy for standard railway cars and required special heavy-duty flat cars. Specialized equipment was necessary for loading and unloading vehicles to avoid damaging them. Weight management during these operations was critical to prevent mechanical breakdowns. Several King Tiger tanks were damaged when ramps failed due to excessive weight during loading procedures. Following a draining operation near the Vistula River, the battalion initiated a 50-kilometer road march toward their designated positions. This relatively brief movement turned into a major setback. The first issues arose with final drive failures, causing tanks to stall as drive sprockets succumbed to the strain of heavy loads. Soon after, transmission problems emerged. Gear synchronizers fractured, bearings seized up, and clutches were destroyed by excessive heat. Within 2 days of starting the road march, 37 out of 45 King Tigers had become non-operational and required repair. The remaining 8 operational King Tigers promptly joined combat against Soviet forces pushing to expand their bridgehead at Borono-Sandys. On August 11-12, 1944, these tanks engaged T-3 Forfin 85s in close-quarters battles around the town of Oglando. 3 King Tigers were destroyed during an ambush by Soviet tanks firing from concealed positions on their thinner side armor. Most crew members perished due to ammunition explosions triggered by enemy fire. These losses prompted a strategic shift in German armored doctrine, which had previously stored main gun ammunition in the turret for easier access by crews. The Oglando incident highlighted that turret strikes could result in catastrophic ammunition fires. Consequently, King Tigers began storing all main gun rounds in whole racks instead of turrets, thereby reducing available ready rounds but significantly enhancing crew safety if the tank's armor was penetrated. The change decreased the ammunition capacity from 84 rounds to 68 rounds. By March 1945, German records indicated that the King Tiger tanks had a readiness rate of 59%. This meant that almost half of these vehicles were not operational at any given time and required repair. On March 15, 1945, statistics showed that the King Tigers operated at a 50-mindedness and readiness level compared to 62% for the Panzer IV and 48% for the Panther. The King Tiger was indeed more reliable than the Panther by the end of the war, but still fell short compared to older, simpler designs. This enhancement resulted from extensive practical experience and collaboration between Henschel engineers and field units to pinpoint and resolve mechanical issues. Upgraded seals, reduced oil leakage, enhanced gaskets, and improved coolant retention were among the modifications made. Reinforced drivetrain components endured longer under stress. A new track design with broader links evenly distributed weight. Enhanced driver training minimized mechanical wear. Improved maintenance procedures helped identify potential problems before they escalated into failures. By early 1945, the King Tiger had become a much more reliable vehicle compared to its earlier production models. However, by then, Germany was unable to maintain even this higher readiness rate due to shortages of fuel, spare parts, and industrial capacity. The Battle of the Bulge served as a critical test for the reliability of the King Tigers under operational conditions. Kampfgruppe Piper spearheaded the German offensive in December 1944 with about 455 King Tigers from Schur SS Panzerment 5 and Regia 1 attached to the 1st S Panzer Division. The plan was to make a rapid advance to capture bridges over the Meuse River, isolate Allied forces, and seize fuel depots for the offensive. On December 16, 1944, Kampfgruppe Piper entered Belgium through the Lachem Gap as part of this operation. The force consisted of roughly 800 soldiers, 600 vehicles, including the attached King Tigers, and advanced with promising initial results. American defenses were sparse and weak to begin with. Initially, resistance was minimal, allowing Piper's forces to capture Hansfeld town and seize an American fuel depot, which they used to refuel their vehicles. However, mechanical issues started surfacing almost immediately. Around 12 King Tigers failed to depart the assembly area due to technical problems even before the offensive commenced. The remaining tanks supported Piper's push towards Stavello, where his troops secured a bridge over the Inlave River on December 18th. From there they proceeded toward Leys, a small Belgian village that would mark their final position. Only 6 King Tigers reached Lels intact. Others had suffered breakdowns along the way or were stationed to guard critical points at Stavello and Thun. One of those operational tanks was number 213, commanded by SS Obersturmführer Helmuth Dollinger. Dollinger's original tank had malfunctioned, so he took over command of 213 for an SS Hauptmann Franz Fassmann. Meanwhile, the King Tigers were deployed around Lels to fend off anticipated American counterattacks. Tanks 213 and 221, under the commands of SS Obersturmführer Helmuth Dollinger and SS Unteroffizier Georg Hanisch respectively, occupied strategic positions on high ground south of Lels at Weemont Farm. This elevated location provided a commanding view over the road from Trounce, offering superior firing lines against any approaching American units. On December 21, 1944, the Americans launched an assault. Task Force Major and Task Force Love, Lady of the 3rd Armored Division, advanced up the valley with approximately 25 tanks. The King Tigers engaged them at extremely long ranges, roughly 2,000 meters out. At this distance, American tank guns could not retaliate effectively. Despite having a clear upper hand, the Americans pressed on, using terrain to their advantage and advancing incrementally while gradually reducing the range between them and the German positions. The intensity of the counterattack escalated dramatically. An American projectile struck the main gun barrel of Tank 213, causing severe damage that rendered the weapon inoperable. The precise sequence of events is still uncertain. Some reports suggest a direct hit on the barrel from a lucky shot, while others indicate multiple strikes that gradually accumulated enough damage to disable the gun. Regardless of how it occurred, Tank 213 was left unable to participate further in combat. Dolinger sustained an injury to his head during the exchange, probably due to shrapnel piercing through the crew compartment. He sought refuge in the basement of the Wimond farm as his team tried to repair the tank. Meanwhile, Camp Grouper Piper's predicament had grown dire, isolated from supply routes and running critically low on fuel and ammunition. They were surrounded by American forces with no viable escape route. On December 23rd, Piper received authorization for withdrawal, yet doing so using armored vehicles was not feasible as the King Tigers and other heavy machines were devoid of fuel. Facing a critical juncture, Piper decided the only recourse was to retreat on foot, abandoning all substantial equipment. Around 800 soldiers managed to break through the encirclement during the night from December 23rd to December 24th, traversing rough terrain to rejoin their division near Wani. Out of this group, approximately 770 individuals successfully regrouped with their parent unit. Left behind at Lel Paper's location were 105 abandoned armored vehicles, including 6 King Tigers, 13 Panthers, 6 Panzer IVs, and more than 50 half-tracks along with other types of vehicles. Demolition squads attempted to destroy the equipment before being overtaken by advancing American forces, but their efforts were limited by time constraints. Consequently, many vehicles, such as Tank 213, fell into enemy hands relatively undamaged. Post-battle, U.S. recovery teams patrolled Laz and began dismantling captured German machinery. However, retrieving Tank 2213 proved challenging due to its position on a narrow farm road. In July 1945, the U.S. Army was set to tow a tank away for scrap. Jenny Jen Andrews, who ran a local cafe, stepped in and offered the soldiers a bottle of cognac if they would leave it behind. Her aim was preservation. She felt that the tank should stand as a memorial to Lazy's wartime struggles. The American troops agreed, and Tank 213 was relocated to the village square right outside the church. It stayed there for many years until it started to deteriorate, after which restoration efforts began in 1951. Damaged parts of the gun barrel were replaced with sections from abandoned Panther tanks nearby in 1975. The tank underwent a comprehensive restoration and repainting before being moved to its present location outside the December 44 Museum, where it remains the sole King Tiger on display at its original European battlefield. Another King Tiger, Tank 3032, also has an extensively documented history. It originated from Schwab Bitches Panzer Abteilung 501 and was abandoned near Patay, Kuppen, Belgium on December 24, 1944. Sergeant Glenn George of the 740th Tank Battalion discovered the intact tank during a patrol while his unit, attached to the 87th Airborne Division defending the northern shoulder of the Bulge, was on duty there. Despite being abandoned, the tank was in remarkable condition because its crew had tried but failed to destroy it before retreating. American forces arrived too quickly for them to complete their task. The tank was recovered by the 463rd Ordnance Evacuation Company and transported first to Spa, Belgium, then shipped through Antwerp to the United States. Tank 3332 eventually reached Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland, where it underwent a thorough examination. American engineers conducted an extensive analysis similar to that performed on earlier captured tanks. The vehicle underwent comprehensive measurement, photography, testing, and documentation of all its components. The tank was stationed at Aberdeen for about 4 decades, exposed outdoors, during which time weather conditions progressively deteriorated its condition. In August 1991, tank number 3032 was relocated to Fort Knox, Kentucky, where it would be showcased in the Patton Museum of Cavalry and Armor. To create an educational cutaway exhibit, technicians carefully sliced open the left side of the hull, revealing the interior layout, ammunition storage areas, and mechanical systems. This allowed visitors to gain insight into how the crew operated within a King Tiger tank and understand the functionality of its various internal systems. Later, it was moved to Fort Benning, Georgia, where it is currently housed in the U.S. Army Armor and Cavalry Collection. It remains the sole intact King Tiger captured by American forces during World War II. The psychological effect on German tank crews was profoundly damaging. They had been assured that they would receive an unbeatable war machine capable of restoring Germany's battlefield superiority. Instead, what they got was a vehicle prone to constant breakdowns, consuming fuel at alarming rates and requiring specialized recovery equipment which was often unavailable. The discrepancy between propaganda claims and the harsh reality led to widespread demoralization among experienced crews. For American tank units, this shift in perception was striking. In July 1944, any mention of a Tiger instilled fear. Intelligence briefings portrayed it as nearly indestructible. Combat reports from British forces described it as invincible. Each rumor made the King Tiger seem more terrifying. However, by December 1944, during the Battle of the Bulge, American crews had learned the truth. While the King Tiger was indeed dangerous in direct combat scenarios, it frequently suffered mechanical failures or ran out of fuel, often leaving it abandoned rather than destroyed by enemy fire. Thus, the legend of an invincible tank was debunked as a flawed weapon system. Post-battle reports from the Bulge noted that more King Tigers were found abandoned due to mechanical issues or lack of fuel than those actually eliminated by Allied forces. Tank operators encountered numerous instances where King Tigers were left alongside roads due to damaged tracks, seized engines, or failed transmissions. Some vehicles had only minor damage that could have been readily repaired on simpler tanks. However, the intricate nature of the King Tiger made field repairs exceedingly difficult without access to specialized tools and highly trained mechanics. Captured German tank crew members provided valuable insights during technical interrogations, revealing significant issues with the vehicle's reliability. Drivers noted that shifting gears required constant attention to prevent damage. Any abrupt maneuvers or sudden changes in speed posed a risk of transmission failure. Commanders expressed concerns about the unreliability of their tanks over long distance movements and had to plan for frequent breakdowns and recovery operations. Maintenance crews disclosed that repairing a King Tiger demanded specialized tools, rare components, and skilled technicians. For example, fixing a track on a Sherman tank typically took an hour using basic equipment and manpower, whereas addressing a similar issue on a King Tiger was far more complicated due to its overlapping road wheels and intricate suspension system. This process often required several days and specialized equipment, as each inner wheel needed the removal of multiple outer wheels first. Winter conditions compounded the maintenance challenges. Mud and ice freezing between the wheels made repairs nearly impossible under field conditions. When transmissions failed, complete replacement was necessary, an arduous task that required heavy lifting equipment and a team working for multiple days. The transmission itself weighed over half a ton, necessitating specialized jacks and hoists to remove it safely. Installation of a new one demanded precise alignment and careful adjustment. Most field maintenance units lacked the requisite tools and expertise to carry out these tasks. Consequently, King Tigers with transmission failures usually had to be towed back to rear area workshops, assuming that recovery vehicles capable of handling 70 tons were available. Production statistics ultimately highlighted how industrial capacity played a crucial role in determining victory. Germany invested the equivalent industrial resources needed to build 3 medium tanks into producing 1 King Tiger. In contrast, the United States managed to manufacture 11 Shermans within the same time frame using comparable resources. For each King Tiger that Germany deployed on the battlefield, America fielded 11 Shermans which were more dependable, easier to maintain, and capable of reaching their destinations reliably. American factories outpaced German production capabilities significantly. The Chrysler tank assembly line in Detroit churned out over 18,000 Sherman tanks between 1942 and 1945 alone. This single facility produced a greater number of tanks than the total output of all King Tigers by Germany throughout the war. At peak production, Ford Motor Company manufactured more than 1,000 Shermans per month. General Motors, American Locomotive Company, and other manufacturers also contributed tens of thousands to this formidable output. This advantage in manufacturing was not limited merely to quantity, it extended to speed and efficiency as well. An American factory could replace a destroyed Sherman tank within weeks. Conversely, by the final months of the war, Germany had ceased production entirely when it came to replacing lost King Tigers. Moreover, while American logistics managed to swiftly deliver replacement tanks to frontline units, German supply chains often struggled even to provide fuel for existing vehicles, let alone new ones. The insights gleaned from studying these captured machines profoundly influenced post-war tank development in the United States. American designers emphasized reliability and simplicity over sheer power and complexity. These principles continued to shape subsequent armored vehicle designs such as the M48, M60, and M1 Abrams, all of which prioritized maintenance and longevity above all else. American engineers recognized that a tank's most powerful weapon was rendered useless if the vehicle could not reach its intended battlefield due to mechanical failures. Similarly, the thickest armor provided no protection if the tank broke down before ever facing an adversary. These lessons learned from analyzing German engineering practices would guide American tank design for decades to come. Even the most sophisticated technology was rendered useless if it couldn't be maintained by field mechanics. Lessons learned from examining the King Tiger's shortcomings formed the foundation of American military vehicle design principles. Despite its fame in films, video games, and popular culture as the ultimate German tank, the King Tiger's reputation is largely exaggerated. However, when properly positioned and supplied, it was indeed a formidable opponent on the battlefield. British tanker Ken II, who fought in Normandy, described encountering a King Tiger as an incredibly frightening experience due to its massive size, thick armor, and powerful gun. Yet this scenario was rare compared to the reality of war. The majority of King Tigers faced long marches, mechanical stress, inadequate logistics, and inevitable breakdowns, similar to what happened with those first 5 tanks in July 1944. Of the 492 produced, most were lost due to mechanical failures, fuel issues, exhaustion, or abandonment rather than combat destruction. This tank was not a game changer, it symbolized Germany's inability to match Allied industrial capabilities. When American soldiers discovered those first abandoned King Tigers in the summer of 1944, their perceptions shifted dramatically. They had feared German technological superiority and worried about being outmatched. However, they soon realized that even the most advanced German tank could not complete an 80-kilometer road march without suffering catastrophic mechanical failures. The invincible super weapon could not reach its intended battlefield under its own power, revealing Germany's fate clearly to those who found it abandoned. A nation incapable of constructing dependable tanks, unable to supply its armed forces with adequate fuel, and failing to sustain its equipment could never prevail in an industrial war against the combined strength of America, Britain, and the Soviet Union. The abandoned King Tigers bore witness to this reality. These neglected vehicles were potent symbols. American manufacturing prowess and mechanical reliability triumphed over German technological sophistication. Ultimately, victory was determined not by who possessed the finest tanks, but by who could field the largest number of operational tanks. This hard-won lesson, bought with blood across numerous continents, would influence military doctrine for decades to come. The true legacy of the King Tiger lay not in its fleeting combat effectiveness, but in demonstrating that advanced engineering devoid of reliable implementation was ultimately futile. That was the genuine narrative of the King Tiger,